1. Derinkuyu, underground city, Cappadocia, Turkey. Beneath the Nevşehir province of central Turkey, approximately 40 kilometers south of the regional capital, a network of tunnels descends at least 85 meters into volcanic tuff rock. The city is not a cave. It is engineered. Derinkuyu spreads across an estimated 445 square meters of mapped surface area and contains at least 18 discrete levels of habitation. It held an estimated 20,000 people simultaneously, larger than many medieval European cities. Its ventilation shafts, more than 50 of them, reach depths that would swallow a 10-story building. The largest chamber could seat several hundred people without crowding. In 1963, a resident of Derinkuyu village knocked through a wall during a home renovation and found a room that led to a corridor that led downward into something he could not explain. Turkish archaeologist Muzaffer Demir led the first systematic survey in 1964. What emerged over subsequent excavations was a fully functional subterranean city complete with stables, wineries, oil presses, communal kitchens, chapels, and individual dwelling rooms. The city could be sealed from inside using large circular stone doors, each weighing hundreds of kilograms, rolled into place against the passage. They were operable only from within. The doors seal inward, not outward. Whoever built Derinkuyu was not hiding from animals. They were hiding from people, and they designed their refuge so that no force from outside could follow them in. Turkish authorities and mainstream archaeologists attribute Derinkuyu to early Christian communities of the Byzantine period, approximately the 7th to 10th century CE, who sought shelter from Arab raids. Officials claim the site belongs to a known historical period with a documented threat. The Turkish Ministry of Culture has restricted independent geological dating at Derinkuyu. Requests to conduct deep layer core sampling to date the earliest excavation phases, work that could reveal whether the city predates the Byzantine attribution, have been denied, citing preservation mandates. Only approximately half the structure has been open to researchers. The lower levels remain sealed, officially for structural safety reasons. The technology exists, the permission does not. If Derinkuyu was built by Byzantine Christians in the 7th century, why does the engineering, the ventilation mathematics, the load-bearing column placement exceed anything documented in Byzantine construction records? If the lower levels are sealed for safety, why have no structural engineering assessments been published to support that claim? If someone built a city for 20,000 people beneath the earth and designed its doors so that nothing outside could follow them in, what exactly were they sealing themselves away from? 2. The Cappadocia Tunnel Network, Central Turkey. Derinkuyu is not alone. Across a region of central Turkey roughly the size of the state of Connecticut, archaeologists have documented over 200 underground cities and thousands of kilometers of connecting tunnel networks. The largest confirmed passage connects Derinkuyu to the underground city of Kaymaklı, 8 kilometers to the north through a continuous carved corridor. The Kaymaklı to Derinkuyu passage alone runs longer than the distance from one end of Manhattan to the other. When researchers began mapping all confirmed subterranean sites in Cappadocia, the combined tunnel length exceeded conservatively 100 kilometers. That figure covers only what has been opened and surveyed. The majority of mapped tunnel routes remain sealed. In 2014, during urban construction work in Nevşehir city center, bulldozers broke through the roof of an underground chamber unlike anything previously documented in the region. The Turkish Housing Development Administration halted construction immediately. Archaeologist Hasan Unver, then mayor of Nevşehir, announced that ground-penetrating radar had identified a subterranean complex beneath the city, potentially larger than Derinkuyu itself. Initial surveys estimated the site at 5 kilometers square of navigable passages. The project, Unver stated publicly, could rewrite the history of the region. The Nevşehir discovery sits directly beneath a modern city of 90,000 people. The layers above it contain continuous human occupation stretching back thousands of years, meaning the city overhead was built, rebuilt, and rebuilt again directly on top of a subterranean complex, whose existence was either unknown or deliberately ignored by every subsequent civilization that settled there. Turkish authorities confirmed the discovery but reclassified the construction site as a protected cultural zone. Officials stated that full excavation timelines depend on funding allocation and structural assessment. Since 2014, independent archaeological teams have been denied excavation permits at the Nevşehir site. The Turkish Ministry of Culture has conducted all work internally. No international peer-reviewed report on the new complex has been published. Ground-penetrating radar data collected in 2014 has not been released publicly. Construction of the housing development was halted and quietly redirected to a different site, with no official statement explaining what the full scope of the subsurface find required. If the Nevşehir complex is simply another Byzantine shelter network, why has its full extent not been published after a decade of internal excavation? If the data from 2014 ground-penetrating radar surveys showed only what officials claim, why has that data not been shared with international researchers? If an entire city of 90,000 people sits above a subterranean complex that may be the largest of its kind on Earth, what exactly is the reason that no independent researcher has been permitted to confirm what lies beneath it? 3. The Longyu Caves, Zhejiang Province, China. In 1992, in Xianbeikun village in Zhejiang Province, China, farmers began draining a series of ponds they had treated as natural features for generations. After 17 days of continuous pumping, the water level dropped far enough to reveal that the ponds were not natural features at all. They were the flooded entrances to a series of massive hand-carved chambers cut directly into siltstone bedrock. The Longyu Caves, 24 confirmed chambers, though only 7 fully surveyed, cover an estimated 30,000 square meters of carved interior space. The largest chambers reach ceiling heights of 30 meters, roughly equivalent to a 10-story building carved hollow from solid rock. Removing the volume of rock required to create these chambers would fill more than 60 Olympic swimming pools. The scale of the excavation has no parallel in the surrounding region's documented history. A local villager named Wu Anai initiated the drainage in November 1992. Archaeologist Chu Keliang led the first formal survey for the Zhejiang Provincial Institute of Archaeology in 1993. The team documented uniform chisel marks covering every wall, ceiling, and pillar surface. Parallel lines spaced approximately 2 centimeters apart, struck at a consistent 45-degree angle across the entire complex. No surface was left unmarked, no tools were recovered from inside, no debris from the excavation was found anywhere near the site. Geologists estimated that excavating these chambers required removing approximately 1 million cubic meters of rock. That material, enough to fill hundreds of construction dump trucks, does not exist anywhere in the archaeological records surrounding the site. It simply is not there. Chinese authorities dated organic material in the cave walls to approximately 2,000 years ago, placing construction in the Qin or Han dynasty periods. Officials have suggested the caves were used for military storage or as quarrying sites, though no quarrying evidence, no imperial records, and no artifacts consistent with either use were recovered. Not because the site is inaccessible, but because the investigation has been closed. A 2001 engineering team proposed ground-penetrating radar surveys to map unexcavated chambers believed to connect to the known complex. The proposal was declined. The site was subsequently developed as a tourist attraction, and invasive research was prohibited under cultural protection classifications. 6 of the 24 chambers remain flooded and unstudied. Requests from international geology teams to analyze the chisel patterns using microscopic wear analysis, which could identify the tools used, have not been granted. If the Longyu Caves were a Han Dynasty quarry, where did 1 million cubic meters of excavated rock go? If the chisel marks covering every surface were simply a byproduct of construction, why do they appear with uniform precision across an area equivalent to 6 football fields? If a civilization carved 30 chambers of this scale into solid rock without leaving a single tool, a single record, or a single piece of debris, what else did they accomplish that remains buried and unexamined? 4. The Naours underground city, Picardy, France. Beneath the village of Naours in the Somme department of northern France, approximately 25 kilometers north of Amiens, a network of galleries extends through soft chalk bedrock for nearly 3 kilometers. The complex sits between 10 and 30 meters below the surface and contains over 300 rooms organized into distinct neighborhoods, each with its own well, chapel, and stabling areas. The Naours network could shelter approximately 3,000 people simultaneously. Its galleries run longer than 30 consecutive city blocks. The complex was large enough that during documented historical use periods, entire village populations relocated underground for months at a time, carrying livestock, provisions, and religious objects. and left no trace visible from the surface above. Naours was known locally for centuries, used as shelter during the 30 Years' War and the Wars of Religion. Systematic documentation did not begin until the Abbé Danicourt surveyed and mapped the complex in the 1870s. He found inscriptions dating to the 3rd century CE cut into the walls alongside medieval French, Flemish, and Latin graffiti. In 2016, archaeologist Gilles Prilot discovered something Danicourt had not: over 2,000 carvings left by Australian and British soldiers stationed near the Somme in 1916, inscribed in the walls during the First World War. Many of those soldiers died in the subsequent battle fought in the fields directly above. Some of the deepest galleries at Naours contain inscriptions that predate all documented historical use of the complex by centuries. They were not carved by medieval villagers. They were there when the first documented users arrived, and no institution has formally investigated who cut them or when. French heritage authorities classify Naours as a mouchi, a specifically northern French tradition of communal refuge tunnels dug during periods of medieval warfare. Officials suggest the entire complex belongs to that category, and that designation settles the matter. The Naours Caves are administered by the municipality as a tourist site. Sections identified by ground-penetrating radar as containing additional galleries have not been opened. A proposal by researchers at the University of Picardy, Jules Verne, to conduct full radiometric dating of the earliest inscriptions was submitted and went without funded response. Access for independent researchers requires municipal authorization, granted selectively and only for designated areas. The deeper sections remain sealed. The oldest inscriptions remain undated. If the oldest inscriptions at Naours belong to known historical periods, why have they never been formally dated or attributed? If the sealed galleries contain only more of what has already been documented, why not open them? If soldiers carved their names into these walls the night before they died above, and those walls hold older carvings no one has read, who decided those carvings were not worth investigating? 5. The Wieliczka Salt Mine Chapels, Poland. Beneath the town of Wieliczka, 9 kilometers southeast of Krakow, a salt mine descends through 9 levels to a maximum depth of 327 meters. Mining began there in the 13th century. By the 19th century, miners had carved something no one had commissioned and no formal architectural record had anticipated: a subterranean civilization of chambers, chapels, corridors, and sculptures, all cut entirely from salt. The Wieliczka mine contains over 300 kilometers of passages across its 9 levels. The Chapel of St. Kinga, its largest carved chamber, measures 54 meters long, 18 meters wide, and 12 meters high, roughly the interior volume of a large cathedral, with chandeliers, bas-relief altarpieces, and a floor polished smooth, all carved entirely from salt by miners working without architectural training across generations. The carved chambers developed gradually over centuries, beginning with small devotional niches cut by individual miners in the 14th century. By the 18th century, these had expanded into full chambers with vaulted ceilings and freestanding sculptures. Polish engineer and historian Stanisław Staszek conducted the first systematic survey in 1817, documenting chambers that had not appeared in any administrative mine record. In 1978, UNESCO inscribed Wieliczka on its first World Heritage List. That same year, Polish authorities sealed the 8th and 9th levels, the oldest accessible sections of the mine, citing methane gas accumulation. The Chapel of St. Kinga contains acoustic properties that were not accidental. Sound travels through the chamber in ways consistent with precise geometric calculation of wall angles and ceiling curvature. Miners with no formal training in acoustics produced a room whose sonic behavior would have required intentional engineering, and no record of that calculation survives. Polish heritage authorities describe the chapel carvings as folk devotional art, the organic product of religious miners expressing faith through their labor. The acoustic properties, when raised, are quietly attributed to coincidence. The 8th and 9th levels were sealed in 1978 and have not been reopened. Gas accumulation is the stated reason. Ventilation technology that safely manages methane in active mining operations exists and has existed for decades. Proposals to conduct remote sensing of the sealed levels using non-invasive laser scanning have been submitted to Wieliczka Mine Management more than once since 2005. Neither proposal received a formal response. The oldest sections of the mine remain inaccessible. If the sealed levels contain only more carved chambers like those above, why not ventilate them and document them? If the acoustic engineering in St. Kinga's Chapel was accidental, why does replicating it require calculation? If miners cut cathedrals into the earth over centuries without any record of instruction, what understanding of space, sound, and structure did they carry that has not survived in any written form? 6. The Erdstall tunnel networks, Bavaria and Austria. Scattered across the rural landscape of Bavaria in southern Germany and the Upper Austria region, farmers and construction workers have been breaking through floors and finding narrow hand-dug tunnels for centuries. Its tunnels, collectively called Erdstalle, from the German meaning roughly earthplace, have been documented in the hundreds across the region. As of the most recent academic survey, over 700 confirmed examples have been identified in Bavaria alone. 700 tunnels. Excavated by hand, without mechanical tools, through clay and sandstone, often descending several meters before branching into rounded chambers, barely large enough for a single adult to lie flat. They're too small for storage, too low for conventional shelter, too narrow for any documented medieval practical use. They exist in greater density across southern Germany than any other known unexplained archaeological feature in Europe. Erdstall appeared in regional folklore for centuries as Koboldluker, goblin holes, attributed by local tradition to supernatural excavators. Systematic academic study did not begin until the 1990s when researchers began cataloging physical characteristics across dozens of sites. In 2011, findings were presented to the European Association of Archaeologists, estimating that the true count of Erdstall across Central Europe could exceed 2,000 when unexcavated examples were included. That estimate has never been formally challenged, and no comprehensive excavation program has been initiated. Many Erdstalle contain a feature called the Schlupf, a deliberate constriction in the tunnel so narrow that only a person who has exhaled completely and pressed flat against the stone can pass through it. The constriction serves no load-bearing function. It was cut intentionally to ensure that only someone willing to make themselves entirely defenseless could proceed further. Mainstream archaeology has proposed several functions: grain storage, escape routes, and meditation chambers. None of these explanations has been substantiated with artifact evidence. The tunnels are consistently empty of any recoverable material. The technology exists, the funding does not. Optically stimulated luminescence dating of the tunnel walls could establish construction periods with precision. A proposal to conduct comprehensive dating across a representative sample of 50 tunnels was submitted to the Bavarian State Office for Monument Protection. It was not funded. The tunnels are listed, measured, and set aside. No federal German archaeological body has allocated resources to answer the basic question of when the Erdstalle were built or by whom. If the Erdstalle were grain stores, why do none of them show chemical residue consistent with stored organic material? If they were built for shelter or escape, why were the Schlupf constrictions cut to make passage almost impossible? If over 700 tunnels were dug across a single German state by people who left no tools, no artifacts, and no written record of their purpose, what exactly were they doing inside them? And why did they need the world above to be unable to follow? 7. The Taino cave complex, La Romana, Dominican Republic. In the limestone karst terrain of La Romana province in the southeastern Dominican Republic, a network of caves extends through the bedrock for approximately 14 kilometers. This system contains the largest known concentration of pre-Columbian cave art in the Caribbean. An estimated 1,200 individual pictographs and petroglyphs, cut and painted by Taino and earlier Arawakan peoples across multiple chambers. 1,200 images, covering cave surfaces across chambers for distances longer than 10 consecutive city blocks of continuous subterranean space. Some pictographs reach ceiling heights of 8 meters, requiring elevated platforms to execute, platforms that left no archaeological trace. The figures include representations of the Taino supreme deity Yukahu, ritual ceremony scenes, and forms that do not correspond to any documented Taino iconographic tradition. Spanish colonial-era records mention caves in the region, but systematic archaeological documentation did not begin until anthropologist Marcio Veloz Majolo conducted surveys in the 1970s for the Dominican Museum of Natural History. Veloz Majolo identified the network as a ritual site of exceptional importance. In 1997, archaeologist Adolfo López Belando documented a previously unrecorded interior chamber containing pictographs that appeared to predate all confirmed Taino occupation of the island by several centuries. The dating of those images has not been formally published in the decades since. Several pictographs in the deepest, least accessible chambers depict figures with proportions and formal characteristics inconsistent with Taino artistic convention. They appear not where ritual use would have been most common, but farthest from it. Dominican cultural authorities and mainstream Caribbean archaeologists attribute the entire complex to Taino and earlier Arawakan peoples, dating occupation to approximately 700 to 1500 CE. Officials classify the site as a protected national monument and suggest all imagery belongs within that framework, not because research is impossible, but because access has been structured to prevent it. The shallower section of the complex was developed as a tourist site in the 1990s. The deeper sections containing the oldest and least categorized imagery require special permits from the Ministry of Culture that are routinely delayed. A 2009 proposal by a joint Dominican-American team to conduct uranium-thorium dating on the pigments of the anomalous figures was submitted and received no formal response. The anomalous images remain undated. If all 1,200 images were created by documented Taino populations between 700 and 1500 CE, why do certain figures in the deepest chambers show iconographic characteristics that predate confirmed human occupation of the island? If the anomalous figures are simply stylistic variation within Taino art, why has no comparative analysis been published in the 15 years since it was proposed? If the people who painted these images 8 meters above the cave floor did so in complete darkness, in the farthest reaches of a 14-kilometer network, what were they recording, and for whom? 8. Subterranean Rome, Italy. Beneath the streets of Rome, at depths ranging from 2 to 30 meters below the current ground surface, lies a parallel city. Not metaphorically, physically. Layers of construction spanning 3,000 years of continuous occupation have produced a subsurface Rome of catacombs, aqueduct channels, Mithraic temples, Republican-era foundations, Etruscan drainage systems, and sealed chambers whose contents have never been catalogued. The catacombs of Rome alone, not including any other subterranean structure, extend for an estimated 500 to 600 kilometers of passageways and contain the remains of an estimated 6 million people. Laid end to end, those passages would stretch from Rome to Copenhagen. The catacombs represent perhaps 10% of what lies beneath the city. The sealed Mithraic temples, the Republican-era structures buried under forum construction, the Etruscan infrastructure, none of it has been mapped. Systematic exploration of subterranean Rome began with archaeologist Giovanni Battista de Rossi, who mapped portions of the Christian catacombs beginning in the 1850s. De Rossi established the field of Christian archaeology and produced the first accurate charts of the subterranean Christian network. De Rossi himself noted in his published reports that his surveys revealed structures beneath the Christian catacombs that predated Christianity entirely, chambers cut into the rock at lower depths with no artifacts and no connection to any documented Roman religious practice. He noted them. He did not pursue them. His successors did not pursue them either. The Basilica of San Clemente in Rome descends through 4 distinct layers. The current 12th century church, a 4th century Christian basilica beneath it, a 1st century Roman insula beneath that, and at the lowest accessible level, a Mithraic temple with a functioning underground stream still flowing through it. Geologists have noted that the bedrock beneath San Clemente contains excavated voids extending below even the Mithraic level. Those voids have not been entered. Italian cultural authorities manage subterranean Rome through the Soprintendenza Speciale di Roma, which oversees archaeological access. Officials state that excavation proceeds responsibly given the density of overlapping structures and the risk of surface subsidence, and that resources are allocated as they become available. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by researchers from La Sapienza University in 2015 identified multiple previously unrecorded subsurface chambers within a 2-block radius of the Colosseum. Permit applications to excavate several of the most structurally accessible chambers were submitted to the Soprintendenza in 2016. According to available records, none resulted in approved excavations. One application was quietly denied, with no written explanation provided. The voids beneath San Clemente remain uncharted. If the chambers beneath San Clemente extend below the Mithraic level into voids no one has entered, why have no non-invasive imaging surveys been conducted to determine their extent? If multiple unrecorded chambers were identified beneath central Rome in 2015, why has no excavation permit been approved in the years since? If the capital of an empire that built roads across 3 continents left a subsurface city beneath its own streets that no one has fully mapped, what exactly is being preserved by leaving it unstudied? 9. Chavin de Huantar. Galleries, Ancash, Peru. In the Andean highlands of Ancash province, Peru, at an elevation of 3,177 meters above sea level, the ceremonial center of Chavin de Huantar contains something its above-ground architecture does not suggest: a labyrinthine network of interior stone galleries cut into the temple platform itself, stacked across multiple levels and connected by ventilation shafts so precisely angled that they maintained airflow through the entire complex for over 2,000 years. The interior gallery network at Chavin extends for several hundred meters of interconnected passage within the temple mound itself. Its ventilation shafts, some no wider than a human forearm, maintain consistent airflow across a stone structure weighing tens of thousands of tons. The acoustic properties of the central gallery were engineered so that sound produced at specific points travels the full length of the complex, arriving at the far end amplified rather than diminished. These properties require calculation. They are not the result of coincidence. Peruvian archaeologist Julio C. Tello conducted the first formal excavation of Chavin de Huantar in 1919, identifying it as a foundational site of Andean civilization. But the full extent of the interior galleries was not documented until archaeologist John Rick of Stanford University began systematic mapping in 1995. Rick's team spent years working through galleries that conventional archaeology had either missed or categorized as minor structural features. By 2010, they had identified multiple gallery levels and ventilation systems whose engineering precision consistently exceeded what Chavin's attributed construction period, are approximately 900 to 200 BCE, would conventionally predict. Rick's team discovered that certain galleries at Chavin produce acoustic effects consistent with the resonant frequency of a large feline call when specific stone surfaces are struck. The gallery geometry amplifies, channels, and transforms the sound before projecting it through the complex. Producing this effect requires designing the gallery in 3 dimensions around its acoustic output before a single stone is placed. Peruvian cultural authorities and mainstream Andean archaeologists attribute the galleries to the Chavin culture, a pre-Inca society documented through ceramic and iconographic evidence. Officials suggest the acoustic properties reflect accumulated empirical knowledge developed through construction across generations. In 2003, a mudslide damaged portions of the Chavin complex and buried access to several gallery sections that Rick's team had not yet fully mapped. The Peruvian Ministry of Culture authorized stabilization work but did not authorize re-excavation of the buried sections. A formal proposal to excavate and document the sealed galleries was submitted in 2005. The ministry acknowledged receipt. No permit was granted. 20 years later, the buried galleries remain unaccessed. The portions of the acoustic system they may contain have not been measured. If the Chavin gallery acoustics were developed through generations of trial and error, why is there no evidence at the site of earlier, less precise construction phases leading toward the finished system? If the buried galleries contain only what has already been documented above them, why has a permit to confirm that gone unanswered for 2 decades? If a civilization built a stone labyrinth designed to produce the sound of a predator moving through the dark and then vanished without leaving any written record of how they did it, what else were they capable of that remains sealed in the mountains around us? 10. The rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, Ethiopia. In the Amhara highlands of north-central Ethiopia, at an elevation of 2,500 meters, the town of Lalibela contains 11 Christian churches excavated directly into basaltic rock, connected by tunnels, trenches, and subterranean passageways that form a continuous underground complex. The churches do not sit on the ground. They descend into it. The largest Betimedhane Alem sits at the base of a trench 11 meters deep carved from a single mass of living rock, surrounded on four sides by open-air excavation. Betimedhane Alem measures approximately 33 meters long, 11.5 meters wide, and 11 meters high. It is the largest monolithic church on Earth. It was not built, it was subtracted. Every cubic meter of interior space represents basalt removed, carried away, and never found nearby. Ethiopian basalt is among the hardest volcanic rock formations on the continent, and the full complex of 11 churches, their connecting tunnels, and the trench systems linking them required the removal of several 100,000 tons of it. The churches are attributed to King Lalibela of the Zagwe dynasty, who ruled approximately from 1181 to 1221 CE. According to Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, angels completed much of the construction overnight while human workers rested. Modern archaeological engagement with the site begins with the Portuguese priest Francisco Alvarez, who visited Lalibela in 1521 and described the churches in his 1540 publication. Alvarez wrote that he struggled to describe what he saw because he feared no one would believe him. Mainstream archaeology has spent decades attempting to fit the construction of Lalibela into a conventional medieval timeline with limited success. A tunnel system beneath the churches, partially explored by researchers in the early 2000s, connects the subterranean complex to cave passages extending beyond the known church network. These outer tunnels contain no iconography, no inscriptions, no evidence of religious use. According to available records, they predate the churches above them. They were there before Lalibela began carving, not because the king built on top of existing caves, but because the existing passages were already shaped, already navigable, already leading somewhere. Where they lead has not been documented. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains administrative and spiritual authority over the Lalibela complex. The official position is that the churches were built in the 12th century under King Lalibela. Archaeological inquiry is welcomed in the above-ground structures. The underground extensions are treated as a separate matter, not because the tunnels are inaccessible, but because the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has declined to permit independent archaeological survey of the subterranean extensions beyond the church network. A French archaeological team from the Institut Français d'études Éthiopiennes requested access to the outer tunnel system in 2008 to conduct ground-penetrating radar mapping and documentation. The request was denied by church authorities who stated that the tunnels were sacred space not subject to external study. UNESCO, which inscribed Lalibela as a World Heritage Site in 1978, has no jurisdiction over access decisions within the complex. The tunnels remain unmapped. If the tunnels beneath the Lalibela predate the 12th century churches carved above them, who made them, and why has no institution with the authority to investigate demanded an answer? If non-invasive radar mapping poses no threat to sacred space, why has the denial of access never been formally challenged by the international archaeological community? If King Lalibela carved 11 churches from solid basalt in less than 40 years using medieval hand tools, and beneath those churches lie older passages leading to places no archaeologist has been permitted to go, what exactly is at the end of those tunnels that requires centuries of uninterrupted protection? Conclusion: 10 sites, 11 countries. Civilizations that descended into the earth on every inhabited continent, carving it into rooms, chapels, labyrinths, and acoustic chambers. Engineered with precision that their attributed construction periods struggle to explain. They built cities for 20,000 people that surface history forgot to record. They cut tunnels with deliberate constrictions designed to stop pursuit. They removed millions of tons of rock and left no debris. The stone is there. The chisel marks are there. The doors designed to seal from the inside are still in place. We spend billions mapping the surfaces of other planets. We have produced detailed topographic surveys of Mars, produced orbital imaging of Venus, and sent probes to photograph worlds at the edge of the solar system that no human will ever visit. Meanwhile, the tunnels beneath Lalibela have not been mapped. The lower levels of Derinkuyu have not been dated, and the galleries buried at Chavin have sat sealed for 20 years without an excavation permit being granted. We have chosen to look outward rather than downward. We have decided, through permit denials, unfunded proposals, and quietly redirected research, that what lies beneath the earth is less urgent than what orbits above it. The institutions that benefit from established timelines of human development, The governments that derive cultural authority from settled national histories, and the religious bodies that govern access to their own foundational sites, all share an interest in leaving the ground undisturbed. The question is not whether something significant remains buried beneath these sites. The physical evidence, the sealed levels, the unmapped tunnels, the undated inscriptions, the missing debris from excavations measured in millions of tons, answers that question already. The question is who decided we should not be allowed to find out what it is.